Hi, everyone. It's Denise Brown from caringourway.com. It's good to see those who are joining me live. And we're going to start storytelling today. And we're going to start with 6 words. I want to give a shout out to how I actually started doing 6 word stories. It wasn't my idea. I saw it in an online magazine at the time called Smith Magazine. And they would have us write 6 word stories about all different experiences. Typically, it was kind of like romance. Like, what's a 6 word story about your first date, your worst date, blah, blah, blah. I thought, oh my, this would be so interesting to do around a caregiving experience. So, in my former community, we would write 6 word stories all the time. We're going to get back into it on caringourway.com. So, if you haven't joined us yet, go ahead and join us after today's workshop and start writing with us. I have found it very compelling to think about the bottom line of a story. Just a little bit about me. So I started helping family caregivers in 1990. I helped my dad and I helped my mom. And my brother died a year before my mom. And my brother's wife died this past July. Yeah. My mom died in 2022, my dad in 2023, my brother in 2021, and then his wife, my sister-in-law, in 2024. All right. So I have been connecting with family caregivers almost daily for 35 years. And someone asked me probably about 15 years ago, how do you still have this conversation with family caregivers? And then they said, haven't you run out of material to write about? Because I write a lot about caregiving. And I was just like, what? And it was actually a journalist who asked me this. And I thought, wow, you don't get it. Wow. I mean, a caregiving story has all the elements that hook us. There's drama, there's comedy, there's mystery. All good stories include some kind of element that has a little bit of a conflict. And boy, does a caregiving experience have conflict. And you could take one moment out of a caregiving day and find a story because there's so much that happens. And when I started working with family caregivers, I started hearing the stories, and my writing just took a new, just really found a new level. So I was an English major in college. I wrote for trade magazines after I graduated. And yeah, it was boring to me. I wanted to try something else. So that's what landed me working with older adults and family caregivers. What was interesting is before that, I wasn't sure what to write about. And then after that, I was like, okay, I have found what I want to write about. That's how powerful your stories are. Your stories changed my career. Wow. There's reasons why we tell stories, and I've only included some. And for those who are joining me live, I'd love for you to add in the chat room why you like to tell stories about your experience. So, certainly, storytelling for us is a release, and we tell stories in our journal. We don't have to share stories out loud. We could share them on a page, in a blog post, and that's a form of release. I always feel better when I write it out. And we also might share stories to connect with others in a similar situation. If we tell a story in a certain way, it can help us resolve what felt unresolvable. I'm in a training program to be a better presenter, and I'm focused on telling a story about my sister-in-law who died last summer. And it's really helping me move through how I have felt about her. It's the resolution is really powerful. We also can tell stories to inspire others, and we could inspire others to take action, to tell their own story, or to start connecting with others around stories. And then we might tell a story to inform what it's like to go through a caregiving experience. Dr. Newby, who's in our chat room, is also sharing that narrative therapy can be powerful indeed. Absolutely. And I'd love for you to define narrative therapy for us. And then certainly our stories can be part of advocacy efforts. What do we want to change about our caregiving experience or how others might view our caregiving experience? Our stories can be part of our advocacy efforts. Okay, I had laryngitis in November and now it's 2 months later and I still am having some like, oh my gosh, it's still not gone. It's still not gone. Okay, so I thank you for your patience with me. Okay, all right. So when you're thinking about a story, you can also think about what's the end game? What's the purpose? Resolution, connecting, resolving, inspiring, informing, advocating. We have stories that are for an audience. We have stories that are just for ourselves. What's so great about it is they're all your stories. So you get to really determine whether it's for an audience of one or an audience of as many that are in the audience. Okay, so here's the definition of narrative therapy. It's a therapeutic approach that helps individuals separate themselves from their problems by reauthoring their life stories. It views clients as the experts of their own lives and encourages them to reframe negative narratives into more empowering ones. Wow, that's awesome. And we have one more comment in the chat room. Telling your story helps to release. It also helps others to have hope and be encouraged. Absolutely. And I think that's one of the power of a former family caregiver is that when you're in it, you think, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. What am I going to be like after I'm through this? And a former family caregiver shows that there is a way through and that you're going to be okay because I'm okay. Okay, so let's start writing. When we're thinking about our stories, I like to remember that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you might think, how do we get that in 6 words? Where we're going to start with 6 words and then build it out. And what we're building out is the beginning, the middle, and the end. The beginning might just be I started helping my dad in 2004. And then the middle might be, and because of that, this is what happened. And the end is, and when he died, I was at peace. You get to decide how much goes in the middle. And depending on the purpose of your story, for instance, you might have middle components that you bring in and out. Could be depending about on the audience. There are some elements you bring in, and then when the audience changes, there's some elements that you take out. Just love this feeling that it's our story and we get to decide how to tell it. So let's start storytelling with 6 words. I will mention that I believe in hyphens. So if you have a 6 word story with 20 hyphens, that is a 6 word story. You can hyphenate words, and hyphens are unlimited. And what it does is it just helps you start getting into the rhythm of the 6 words. You think, oh my gosh, I can't get it into 6 words. I'm just going to hyphenate 4 of these words, call it one. There we go. I did it. So hyphens are allowed. Hyphens are unlimited. I wanted to give you some ideas about what to start with and some suggestions for you to write your first 6 word story with us this morning. You could choose to write a 6 word story about the worst day. You could also pick a different day or moment. You could write about Diagnosis Day, the day you and your caree received your caree's diagnosis. You could write a 6 word story about a holiday. You could write a story about a significant moment. We've been doing these workshops for the past probably 3 months. And one of our participants a few months ago wrote a story about Diagnosis Day. And it was something like this. Her silence made me scream inside. And the story was about her mom receiving the diagnosis and just being silent. And the daughter, the writer of the story, sat next to her mom and was so overwhelmed by the emotions of it and trying to keep it all inside that it felt like she was screaming inside. Her mom was silent. She was screaming inside. When you're ready, feel free to post your 6 word story in our chat. What I'm suggesting are simply suggestions. It could be that you think, you know what happened this morning is something I need to write out. So that could be what you are inspired to write about today. It's what feels like, I just want to tell this story. I want to practice this with 6 words. Okay, here we go. Tiny homes, big love, independence preserved. Love it. So you can see how you can also think through, how do words create stories within the story? Tiny homes is one story. Big love is another story. Independence preserved is a third story. And I just want to mention that the story has 2 commas, and you can use punctuation in the way that works for you. Okay. It was a cloudy day, but not overcast. And you could whittle that down a little bit. A cloudy day, but not overcast. I'm curious, for those who are joining me live, what's this experience like? I'd love for you to share a little bit in the chat room what it's like to think through just 6 words for a story. Yeah, you've got it. A cloudy day, but not overcast. Yep. You could tell a 6 word story about Christmas without telling us it was Christmas. Shiny Christmas tree lights. Sadness surrounds. Oh, it's cathartic. Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah. And I just wrote a 6 word story out loud with telling you that you don't need to include that it's Christmas, but I did include Christmas. So you could say, shiny lit tree, but shiny lit tree surrounded by sadness. And that would be a way you could kind of describe a holiday like Christmas without calling it Christmas. I really like to write these stories because it tests me in a different way. And it also helps me get right to what was happening around that holiday. So, that holiday, for instance, there's this shiny light, but I'm not a shiny light. I'm surrounded by sadness. Here are some suggestions of what it could sound like, too. I felt swallowed by too much. Pressure of preventing and predicting overwhelmed. I lost it because they left. Alone with tears while they celebrate. There's one other story in the chat room too. Discharge day was wonderful. Bottom line, right? What's interesting too is these stories beg for more information, right? When you hear a story, discharge day was wonderful, you think, oh my gosh, what was wonderful about it? You're really sparking interest when you tell that story out loud. Here's another story. Overwhelmed, sadness, patience, determination, love. Remember how I said it's really interesting to think about a couple words also telling a story? So that story, overwhelmed, sadness, patience, determination, love, is really 6 stories told with one word. And again, it asks for more. Who was overwhelmed? What was stressful? How did you have patience? What was the determination for? And how did you connect to love? And then here's one more. chaos. Chaos. Her smile, pure blessing. So I'll tell you a little bit about the punctuation. Chaos, comma, her smile, hyphen, pure blessing. So there's a story within the story. The whole story is and there's chaos in that. And then within that chaos is a smile that feels like pure blessing. The stories that I am sharing as suggestions actually are stories that reflect what my experiences were. I love the word swallowed as it relates to caregiving because I always felt like it was swallowing me up. And I think when we're caring for someone, we feel this pressure of being able to predict what could happen so we could prevent it. And we never predict exactly what's going to happen. So that's impossible to prevent. And it's overwhelming. And when my mom was dying, my siblings came and then they left. And I thought, wow, could they stay? And then during the holidays, it always felt like I was the one really entrenched with caregiving, and everybody else was just like, oh man, it's a holiday, let's celebrate. And I would be like, but don't you see what's going on? And then one more story from the chat room. The journey has ended. You could add a little bit to that story about the journey ending. You could say journey ended with, and then you could add in three more words. Journey ended with love, peace, comfort, whatever the three words might be. You are certainly the expert of what those next three words could be. And what we're doing too, which I think is just fabulous, is we're taking the bottom line and then building out from it. So we're starting with the basic of the story, its foundation, which allows us then to build out. And when we build out, we start to color between and around the lines of your story. If you think about your six-word story as a line, and then you're going to start coloring outside of that. And what you're going to add are elements like who's a part of the story, what's happening in the story, why you might be feeling the way you are within the story, maybe when the story happened, and how maybe the story resolved, or how you made it to the next moment, or how you found resolution for the right now moment. You also could start to think about how that story transformed the next moment. And then you go to the next moment with a six-word story. So you start a six-word story, build it out, and then maybe you think, you know what? There's a next one. I'm going to start that with six words, and then you build it out from there. Okay, so now we're getting some more insights about the ending of the journey. And this is, I think, just a great example of what I just shared. Journey ended with the unknown. And that is great to add in more elements, the who, what, why, when, and how. And then there's another story after that. So each six-word story becomes more colorful, and you can figure out how those six-word stories connect to each other. In all of our training programs, we use what we call caregiving wheels. And honest to goodness, there's probably 65 or 66 of them. Once I started, I couldn't stop. And I know we use these wheels in planning sessions that we create for family caregivers, like emergency planning. If just as an aside, if you're interested in creating a family emergency plan and you haven't done that already, we offer free emergency planning sessions on the fourth Friday at noon Eastern time, and we'll add in more sessions. My goal in 2025 is to have as many individuals complete a family emergency plan as possible. So you can join us on caringourway.com and you'll find more information about family emergency planning. So the wheels are part of that as well. And then when I was putting together this workshop, I thought there's a wheel, and the wheel could be used to inspire stories. Now, I included words in this wheel for inspiration, but this isn't all the words that you can use. For those of you who are joining me live, I'm curious, which is a word that jumps out at you when you look at this wheel? Go ahead and share it in the chat room. Time. Yeah. What is it about time? Go ahead and tell us a little more in the chat room. You know, for me, I felt like I spent a lot of time in dread caring for my parents. And honest to goodness, where it would always manifest was in the elevator I was in going up to their apartment. And I have to write a six-word story about that elevator. I still haven't, but I feel compelled to do that because that's where the dread just felt so close. I was enclosed in this elevator. I was going up, and oftentimes I was going up knowing that something had changed. And it didn't matter if I was going back later in the day, I'd already been there in the morning. It just seemed like there was always something. Ah, and then I was the one that always delivered bad news to my parents. So the morning that my brother died, I went to tell my parents. And I remember just pressing that button to go up to their floor thinking, I cannot do this. And yet I must. Okay, time is fleeting. Oh, so thank you for being with us this morning because you're on your way to a funeral in an hour. Oh my gosh, we're a family member. Yeah, our condolences. Thank you for being here. In 6 words, time, never enough. Treasure every second. Yeah, there's never enough. Yeah, thank you for being here. Yeah. Okay. So you're honoring the life of someone who lived a 97 years, almost 98, and she had a good life. There's peace around that. And someone else in our chat room is sharing that navigation is a word that is just coming to mind for them. So I'd love for you to write a 6-word story about navigation and then share it with us in the chat room. And for those of you that see a word or think of a word, feel free to write a 6-word story and then post it in our chat room. It's been so fun to write with you. You know, the one word that really also kind of just jumps out at me is mine, because I felt in my caregiving experience, I was always trying to keep what was mine. That included time, patience, projects, priorities. And it always felt like what was mine was at threat. What was mine was at threat. Okay, that's 6 word. What what was mine was at threat, meaning I just felt like I couldn't keep it because there was always a crisis, always a need that meant I had to take from mine and give to them. I took from mine, gave to give. I guess you could say that's 6 words. Took from mine to give them. That's pretty good. I'm always interested in the words that I picked to put on a wheel in the moment that I created the wheel. So it always also seems to represent a moment of time in my life. If you like this idea of thinking out loud with 8 words just as prompts, at the end of a day, you could think about what are the 8 words that describe today, and then write a 6-word story about each of the words. If you'd like to do a little more journaling with us, we do have a free course on our community Caring Our Way that is 3-word prompts. I post 3 words as prompts for you to write. And you can write it in any way you want. You could write a paragraph about each of the words. You could write a sentence about each of the words. You get to determine what it looks like. Okay, navigating through systems takes time. Oh, yes. Wow. Okay. So, wow, Doctor, you've had I don't even know what to say about the last 24 hours. So you're on your way to a funeral, but you were in the emergency room last night, and that inspired the emergency room story earlier. I thought it was, a little further in your past. I didn't realize it was a mere like 12 or 10 hours ago. And then another story that's coming out of it is what your aunt told the physician. I am an independent Tiny home, one word, resident. Wow, that says it all. That says it all. Wow, wow. Mm. The other part about these six-word stories is that it does encourage us to find that bottom line. And sometimes we get caught up in who did what, when, where, I guess thinking through the drama and putting it into six words helps us better understand the drama. Drama can take a lot of words and it can take a lot of our time and patience. And so thinking it through to get to six words helps us really understand, okay, now I get the bottom line of that drama. I get what just happened with my siblings or my caree or another healthcare professional. Okay, so then we're getting a follow-up six-word story about how the physician responded to the aunt's, that 92-year-old aunt in the emergency room saying, I am an independent tiny home resident. And the physician responded, well, the physician's reaction, he was gobsmacked, smiling at her. Oh, I love the word gobsmacked. Gobsmacked. Yeah, yeah. I think it would be interesting to think about how six-word stories in sequence could be an interesting way to tell a story. I've never done that, but that's kind of interesting to play around with. We talked about that earlier, the sequence of your stories, but we talked about it as a story, adding color around it, another story, adding color around it, another story. But what if it's just six-word stories, one right after another? Not sure what that would look like, but that's kind of interesting. And Doctor, you've been doing that for us today. You've been telling the story of your experience in the emergency room with the sequence of six-word stories. That's so interesting. Ah, okay. I just wanted to mention another component of this. We have been talking about storytelling, and I think it's important to also say that our stories deserve a good listener. And as storytellers, and you guys are all storytellers, we experience a good listener with our storytelling. And then that inspires us to be a good listener for another. So as often as we tell our stories, we can be a good listener to another. And as a listener, I wanted to just give you a couple suggestions that can help you feel like I did a good job listening. And curiosity is the best skill to bring. When we are curious, we can be in a place without judgment and comparison. I'm sure you've had this experience where you tell a story and then you feel like someone responds with a comparison, telling their story, which sounds like they're comparing their story to your story. And guess what? Your story is wrong. That is not a good listener. And you know what that's like. So you bring in this desire to be different. And the difference is curiosity, bringing in the skill of curiosity, wanting to know more, not in order to jump in and fix and offer a suggestion or tell someone what to do, but just to be curious so that you can focus your story on their story by releasing yours. Ask some good questions. We talked about what elements to bring in a story, which are who, why, when, how, where. There's another word, maybe why. The previous slide has those. Those are good questions to ask. What happened next? How did that feel? What was that? Who did that? Those are good questions. And from the chat room, are you don't look tired at all. Doctor, I just think that's fabulous that you have been to the emergency room, into our workshop, and are going to a funeral. And you don't look tired. And you're also sharing what it's like to be a good listener. And it's empathetic listening with eyes, ears, and heart. Yeah, thank you for that. You're still writing 6-word stories. Like, wow, that's awesome. And I want to mention we have one more 6-word story about uh, it's similar to navigation. And the next story is resources within tangled systems. Yes. Yes. Beautiful. Tangled systems. Boy, does that, oh, resources within tangled systems. If you want, you could add another descriptor of tangled systems. You could say confusing, dramatic, awful, heartbreaking. I love that tangled systems. Yeah, and then the doctor is just reminding us about the the soft sounds that you can use to start an open-ended question. That's what I always remember. So it's who, what, when, where, why, how, and what. Soft sounds. A closed-ended question starts with more hard sounds like can, do, are. Those are closed-ended. And you want to ask the open-ended questions. Who did that? When did that happen? How did that make you feel? What happened next? And then just receive the elements of the story. You don't have to judge the story. It's not yours. And then you can thank the storyteller. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm glad to know that. We actually do more around listening and storytelling and a special event that we host twice a year. The next time we're doing it is March 22nd, and that's our Caregiving Listener Project. And you get an opportunity to meet with a trained volunteer listener in a private Zoom room to release a story you've been holding. Could you clarify your request in the chat room? So the 6-wheel info, could you tell me again? Could you just clarify what that, do you mean the wheel that we just looked at? This? Is that what you mean? Tell me if that's what you mean. And, okay, yes, all right. And I will also share these slides with you. So you'll have the PowerPoint so that you can refer to this. So thank you. I'm glad that wheel has been helpful. So in our Caregiving Listener Project, you have an opportunity to tell your story in a private Zoom room to a trained volunteer listener who does what we just talked about as a good listener. And it's an opportunity for you to release a story that you've been thinking too much or feeling too much about. And you might also wonder, who do I tell this to? Because I don't want anyone who knows me to know this story or to know how I feel about this circumstance or situation. It's just nice to tell someone who is completely objective. So that's our Caregiving Listener Project. I'd love for you to think about what story you would like to tell during that event because you've got the story started. You've got inspiration for the story, which is the wheel. As a storyteller, you're going to really work on a 4-minute story. And you're going to build out, for instance, from 6 words, what that story could be. And then you just join a private Zoom room with a trained volunteer listener and tell your story. You could read it. You could refer to notes, or you could just say, you know what, I'm going to do it off the top of my head. We're very flexible about it. So the next time we're doing it is March 22nd. I really would love for you guys to think about becoming a storyteller for that. And I'll continue to share information about this on our website, which is caringourway.com. So in our community, you'll find more. And if you're interested in our advocate training, please let me know because I'd be happy to offer that to you for free. We do this annually for free. Typically, there's a charge for it. It's a nominal charge. It's $47. But if you're interested, as a thank you for joining me today, for watching us as well, If you're interested in this advocate training, please reach out to me and I'll make sure it's accessible for you. Okay, so we did it. That was our work that I wanted us to do today. And again, feel free to join us on our community, caringourway.com. We have the Caregiving Listener Project. We have 3-word journaling. And then I'm going to get us in the habit of writing 6-word stories, and I'll share prompts on a regular basis to help you get into that rhythm about that. Okay, we did it. Thanks you guys so much for being here. This was really wonderful. I feel like, wow, I can't believe that you guys shared this with me this morning. I feel like you're in my living room with me. It was so much fun. Okay, thanks everyone.